Good day everyone, I am Michael, the moderator for this webinar. I welcome everyone for today's webinar, which is FDA's recent draft guidance related to 21 CFR Part 11, Electronic Records Signatures for Clinical Investigations. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our presenter for today, Caroline Triano. Caroline Triano has more than 35 years of experience in computer system validation and compliance in the pharmaceutical, medical device, tobacco, and other FDA-regulated industries. I would now like to hand over the floor to the speaker. Over to you, Caroline.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Caroline Troiano, and we're going to talk about clinical investigations, the trial master file, the electronic trial master file, and how we can meet FDA expectations with the new guidance for Part 11. So we'll cover what we mean by the clinical trial master file, an electronic trial master file, the trial essential files, the ones before the trial begins, during the trial, and after the trial is completed. We'll cover what we mean by GXP systems or FDA-regulated systems. And we'll talk about computer system validation and maintenance of a system in a validated state. We'll talk about GXP documentation principles, policies, and procedures. And then we'll get into 21 CFR Part 11, the Electronic Records and Signatures Guidance, and the draft for ERES and clinical investigations. And finally, we'll have some slides on the regulatory oversight and inspection, some of the trends that are going on with FDA, and we'll follow with a Q&A. So the trial master file is basically a collection of any kind of documents, records, artifacts that are related to or are generated during a clinical trial for humans. Now, TMF, trial master file, can be paper or electronic in format. In the European Union, the TMF must include the documents that show whether the investigator and sponsor complied with good clinical practice and applicable requirements. US FDA doesn't have a formal requirement for maintaining essential documents for a human clinical trial built in directly to the U.S. Code of Federal Regulations, CFR. Now, ICH is supported by the U.S., European Union, and Japan, and they've published a minimum required set of essential documents for a TMF. Now, in other countries, they follow the guidelines in their own national medicines legislation. So they're calling this the TMF reference model. The team was created in 2009 within the document and records management community of the DIA. The TMF reference model, RM, provides for standardization across industry. RM version 2.0 was issued in June 2012, and that was based on feedback from industry. But there still is no formal effort to publish a standard. A goal was to have all clinical trial stakeholders around the world accept the reference model. The TMF RM 3.0 spreadsheet is one that you can take, you can manually modify it if you're going to use it as a classification taxonomy in an electronic database. The TMF-RM doesn't have a controlled vocabulary based on published standards. Now, in 2013, the European Medicines Agency, the EMA, developed a draft guidance recognizing the importance and legal equivalence of the TMF and the electronic TMF. In the European Union, the trial master file has to contain all clinical trial essential documents, and they have to be maintained contemporaneously. And there are many reasons why you might want to use an effective electronic trial master file management application. And you can accelerate clinical trials. The eTMF gives you ease and speed of access, exchange, and management of documents. Paper-based signature capture and handling processes, you can minimize these by using digital signatures. So one way you can succeed is to use an enterprise content management system. An effective electronic trial master file system the model builds on foundational components. Now, most countries around the world, in addition to the US and the European Union, will accept digital signatures in place of handwritten or wet ink signatures. And document classification is what you'll do to prepare for indexing. Now, stored documents have to be managed. Now, predefined quality control checking, you can build that in through business rules that you apply to your software. You can have pre-configured document management reports. These can be generated from the electronic trial master file and automatically be emailed to subscribers that you choose to send them to. Document retrieval is complex and powerful when it's electronic. Now, many document management systems offer content integration and exchange capabilities through open standards. Now, the Content Management Interoperability Services specification, CMIS, is a format for improving interoperability. Now, metadata attributes, the tags used to capture data values for each document for classifying them, searching, and retrieving for reporting. Now, let's look at the clinical trial essential file. The documents are usually audited by the sponsor's independent auditor, and they're usually inspected by regulatory authorities. Every document has a specific description. Now, final closeout of a trial can only be done after the monitor reviewed the investigator institution and sponsor files and confirmed that every necessary document is in the file and is appropriate. So what do we do before the clinical trial begins? Information provided to a trial participant will document their informed consent and any other written information to document that subjects will be given appropriate written information to support their ability to provide fully informed consent. And there's an insurance statement documenting that compensation can be provided to subjects if there is trial-related injury. The IRB-IEC composition documents that it is constituted in agreement with good clinical practice. You'll also document the normal values and ranges for medical, laboratory, technical procedures and tests that are included in the protocol. Now, instructions for handling of the investigational products, trial-related materials. You want to make sure that they are properly stored, packaged, dispensed, and disposed of as necessary. You'll also have decoding procedures for blinded trials. Now, during a clinical trial, there are 25 additional documents that can be collected and added to your TMF. A dated documented approval or favorable opinion from the IRB or IEC, and the regulatory authorities, their authorizations, approvals, notifications where required for protocol amendments, and other documents will show compliance with applicable regulatory requirements. Curriculum vitae, resume, training logs for any new investigators, any sub-investigators as well, anyone added since the trial began. You might update your medical laboratory technical procedures and tests, certification or accreditation. There also are relevant communications other than site visits and meetings. Source documents document the existence of the subject and substantiate integrity of trial data collected. Notification by originating investigator to sponsor when there is a serious adverse event. Subject identification code list. A signature sheet will document the signatures and initials of all people authorized to make entries or corrections to the CRFs. The third stage of the trial is after the trial is over, whether it's completed normally or it's terminated early. All of the documents identified before, during the trial should be in the file together with the following documents added for after completion. Completed subject identification code lists and a final report by investigator to the IRB IEC to the regulatory authorities to document completion of the trial. If you're doing anything with an electronic system, you're going to have to follow FDA rules, the predicate rules, the foundation rules. These are the GXPs where X is a variable. The automated system is one that controls or monitors a piece of equipment, an instrument, or a process. Now, these are examples of some of the clinical trial-related systems. So think about the stakeholders, and this includes third-party participants. Now, the FDA issued their first guidance on computer system validation, CSV, the traditional approach, back in 1983. That's 41 years ago. So whether it's an IT or automated system, you want to make sure you've considered it as in terms of its validation and whether or not the data is with integrity. And once your system is in maintenance mode in production, it goes under formal change control. So you want a strategic approach to validation. You want to know how documentation and approvals will be completed. You'll look also at the GAMP5 category. Now, the risk-based approach, the companies are expected to prioritize systems potentially based on risk. So the probability the risk will occur, the severity, if it does occur, the detectability and mitigation all get looked at. But when you have your system rating, the rating overall of the system based on risk. Now, when you're doing your rationale for testing, requirements, you start with that, you select your system, you determine the GAM5 category, the potential risk, and then think about size, complexity, and business criticality. Based on all of those considerations, you'll come up with a type and level of testing, a rationale for testing. Now, IQ and OQ testing packages. Now, PQ, performance qualification, also called UAT, user acceptance testing. So think about who's going to be using the system for what purpose, how are you going to manage the activities, have the scope identified. Now, the user requirements, this is important. This is workflow. If you have documents that are coming in and they're being sent through a workflow for a review and approval, it's important that the users identify those scenarios. Your functional requirements have to be unique, testable, and identified uniquely. Design spec, you don't have to worry about this. Most packages today, testing IQ, OQ, and PQ, as mentioned, have to be performed. Detailed test protocol for each of these. If there are any defects shown that show up during testing, you have to investigate for the root cause, remediate, and retest. You want a traceability matrix to show that every requirement has one or more test scripts associated with it. The GAM5D model puts it all together. So you want to have a detailed training plan. Training should be documented on day one of go live. You want to have all your maintenance, manuals, scripts, procedures in place. Change control, audit trails, no one should be able to turn off or disable those or delete them. Security, physical and logical, administration. All of the procedures have to be followed. It's not enough to have SOPs on file. And a governance board where you have control over the changes that are made to your system. And ultimately, you retire the system, but you have to make sure, and if you have expired data, it should be destroyed securely. Now, original documentation, email is typically something you can easily doctor. This is a set of policy topic checklists. These are more for maintaining the system in a validated state. And then there's procedural topics, all of them critical to clinical trials. FDA issued Part 11 as a guidance in 1997, and this could be summarized very succinctly. Now, the guidance was done in 1997. Everybody wanted to go paperless. So quality and compliance have to be built in for organizational readiness. Determine that in advance. Now, these are features of your system that can help you meet Part 11. The audit trail, you know who did what action. This is on a database type record, a structured data record. Never delete an audit trail or modify it. You can deactivate it. FDA allows it. You also want to make sure that this is all done with the proper authentication. The meaning of your signature has to be clear. Same with an electronic signature. Segregation of duties, never review or approve your own work. Security, restricting access. You want to apply numerous levels of security if you can. And everything should be authenticated to one person. Backup and business continuity. You want a full backup and recovery system. File formats, record retention, change control, training, make sure everyone has the right level of training. Now, there's a draft guidance for electronic records and signatures for clinical investigation. That was issued in 2003. Now, this draft guidance applies to electronic systems, information technology services. Now, ERES requirements apply to electronic systems. You have to show sufficient backup and recovery procedures are in place to protect against loss. There should be an SOP that addresses how that type of communication is being done. Risk assessment methodology. So if you have a commercial off-the-shelf package, a category 3 according to GAMP5. So during inspection at a sponsor site, for example, this is what FDA says they're going to focus on. So during a clinical investigator site inspection, the FDA is going to focus on. Now, FDA doesn't provide any type of preliminary evaluation of the system. Just a quick look at FDA inspection and audit oversight trends. They may ask questions about who put the data in or changed it. Does validation include a pass-fail, signature, date, time, deviation management? If you get a warning letter or a consent decree from FDA, and the FDA operates that if you didn't document something, you didn't do it. The warning letter is an official correspondence. This is published on FDA.gov. Warning letter trends, data and record integrity, and the recent findings relate to data integrity. Security, make sure no one's sharing passwords or accounts, that you have the right level of validation and testing, and it's sufficient and you have documentation. Training is mandatory and enforced. Documentation has to be available. Best practice, deficiency example, other deficiencies. Here, lack of lab controls, things not reported or recorded when they happen, destroying original raw data.
Thank you, Caroline. So thank you everyone for participating. You may all disconnect now. Have a great day ahead. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.